Have you ever noticed that the deeper you think, the lonelier you feel? That the more clarity you gain, the fewer people seem willing to listen? It's not your imagination. The world doesn't just misunderstand deep thinkers, it avoids them. Not because they're wrong, but because they see what others are afraid to confront. They shine light into corners society prefers to keep in shadow. Look through history's cracked mirror. Socrates questioned too deeply and paid with his life. Galileo uncovered truths and was locked away. Tesla imagined futures and died in obscurity. These were not fools or fanatics. They were minds too far ahead of their time. But why? Why does the world react so violently to those who simply see more? This isn't just a social problem. It's psychological. It's biological. And it's happening right now, perhaps even to you. Because when a person starts thinking for themselves, they don't just threaten ignorance. They disturb the illusion of safety that society desperately clings to. In a world built on comfort and certainty, truth can feel like a threat. Have you ever wondered why intelligence, more than strength or beauty, makes people so uncomfortable? We admire those who are strong. We envy those who are wealthy. But we rarely embrace those who are deeply intelligent. When someone walks into a room with physical power, you might feel protected. When someone shows success, you might feel inspired or even motivated. But when you meet someone who clearly sees through illusion, who questions assumptions without hesitation, something different happens. That's the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just express new ideas. They reflect back the limits of those around them. They become a living mirror, revealing all the things people would rather not face in themselves. And people don't respond kindly to that. Even if the thinker stays silent, their presence alone can trigger discomfort. Why? Because their mind quietly challenges the room without needing to say a word. It's not arrogance. It's not superiority. It's simply that their awareness, their way of seeing, shakes the illusion that others cling to. Think about it. You can admire someone's physique without questioning your own value. You can envy someone's wealth without doubting your intelligence. But when someone speaks with sharp clarity, when they question things you've never dared to examine, the experience doesn't feel inspiring. It feels invasive. It makes people feel small, unsettled, exposed. The deep thinker becomes the problem, not because they are wrong, but because they reveal what others are trying to hide. This is why intelligence becomes isolating. It doesn't just challenge ideas, it challenges egos. And most people, by nature, will do anything to protect their ego. They'll laugh it off, change the topic, or label the thinker as difficult. Not because they don't understand, but because they feel seen, and they don't like what the mirror shows. Why does intelligence trigger such discomfort in others? The answer may lie deeper than social norms or cultural conditioning. It goes back to how our brains evolved. Throughout most of human history, survival didn't depend on being insightful. It depended on being accepted. In tribal communities, the loner wasn't the visionary. They were the outcast, the vulnerable one. Being rejected by the group could mean death. So our ancestors adapted. Not for independent thought, but for harmony, compliance, and approval. And those instincts are still with us. Today, we live in cities, not caves. But the human brain hasn't changed as much as we like to believe. When someone walks into a room with a mind that challenges the group's beliefs, the reaction isn't always rational. It's primal. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Studies show that when people feel intellectually outmatched, their amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and threat detection, becomes highly active. The same region that flares up when we feel endangered by violence also lights up in the presence of a highly intelligent person. But why? Why would intellect feel threatening? Because intelligence, especially when it questions shared assumptions, disrupts the tribal balance. It threatens the cohesion that people instinctively crave. It doesn't matter if the thinker means no harm. Their presence still triggers a defense response. That quiet thinker in the room, the one asking uncomfortable questions, they become the enemy of certainty. And certainty, whether true or false, feels like safety to most people. This explains why so many deep thinkers feel tension in group settings, even when no words are exchanged. They're not being dramatic. They're picking up on an invisible resistance, wired deep into the minds of those around them. And that resistance isn't personal. It's biological. It's the ghost of a tribal instinct that still punishes those who stand apart, even if what they see could lead us forward. In social spaces, intelligence is rarely the loudest voice in the room. Charisma almost always wins. People are drawn to confidence, not complexity. They listen to the person who speaks with certainty, even if their ideas are shallow. Meanwhile, the thinker who speaks in nuance, who questions rather than declares, often gets lost in the noise. It's not that society lacks intelligence, but that it prefers the illusion of simplicity. A bold half-truth often gets more applause than a careful truth layered in doubt. This is why many public figures thrive not by challenging people, but by telling them what they already believe. They reinforce, repeat, and reassure, and that feels good. Deep thinkers, by contrast, often challenge those assumptions. They introduce ideas that require effort. They speak in possibilities, not absolutes. And for many people, that creates discomfort, not clarity. This explains why influencers who deliver bite-sized inspiration get more attention than those offering layered insight. It's easier to go viral with a cliché than with a challenge to think critically. But this isn't just about popularity. It's about social reward systems. The thinker who says, "I'm not sure, let's examine this further," comes across as uncertain. The person who says, "This is the truth, and that's final," comes across as confident. And in human psychology, confidence often gets mistaken for competence, even if it's an illusion. So what happens? The simplified message spreads, while the deeper truth is ignored, and the thinker, despite their clarity, becomes an outsider, not because they're wrong, but because they refuse to flatten their thoughts into something marketable. When deep thinkers introduce new perspectives, they don't just face misunderstanding. They often trigger resistance, not from logic, but from the mind's built-in defenses. This isn't accidental. It's how the brain protects itself. Take the Dunning-Kruger effect. People with low ability tend to overestimate their competence. Meanwhile, those with deep knowledge often doubt themselves more. This creates tension. The less someone knows, the more confident they may feel. And the more someone understands, the more cautious they often sound. Now add the status quo bias. People prefer what's familiar. It feels safe. New information, no matter how valid, requires energy to process. And energy is costly to the brain. Then there's the backfire effect. When someone is shown evidence that contradicts their beliefs, they don't shift. They dig in. They double down. And the thinker is seen not as helpful, but as confrontational. So the thinker becomes a disruptor, not because they are rude, but because truth itself is disruptive. And this is where it gets painful. The thinker has no desire to be difficult. They're offering clarity, but clarity, to the unprepared mind, feels like an attack. And instead of asking, "Could this be true?" people ask, "Who does this person think they are?" It's not the idea they fight. It's the feeling it creates. And the thinker becomes a threat, not for what they say, but for what they awaken. In the digital age, the challenge for deep thinkers has only intensified. Social media wasn't built for reflection. It was built for reaction. The faster you engage, the better you perform. And intelligence doesn't move fast. Algorithms reward content that gets clicks, shares, and comments. But the content that does best is often emotional, divisive, or overly simplified. A nuanced idea, by contrast, requires silence. It asks the viewer to pause, to reflect, and platforms punish that pause. So what rises? Catchy sound bites, outrage, quick dopamine loops. Meanwhile, thinkers who offer careful ideas struggle to keep up. Their thoughts don't fit neatly into a meme. Their arguments require time, not scrolling. Even worse, social media creates echo chambers. People are fed content that aligns with what they already believe. Opposing ideas aren't explored. They're filtered out. So thinkers who challenge the norm don't just fail to trend. They're shadowed, ignored, or labeled as controversial. The tragedy is this. We've created a system where volume beats truth, where attention is currency and depth is a liability. And yet, thinkers keep showing up, even when the platform isn't built for them. Because some ideas are too important to be reduced into a thumbnail. Arthur Schopenhauer didn't view intelligence as a gift. He saw it as a curse. To him, the more a person understands, the harder it is for them to belong. Because most people, he believed, don't want truth. They want comfort. He called it the will to live, a blind force that drives human behavior. Most people, according to him, follow it without question. They chase pleasure, avoid discomfort, and accept illusions to maintain peace of mind. But the deep thinker operates differently. They develop the will to truth, an insatiable need to see things clearly, even if it hurts. This creates tension. The thinker begins to feel out of place. While others find joy in routines, they feel empty. While others enjoy surface-level conversation, they crave depth. They see through small talk, through status games, through polite lies. And because of that, they struggle to connect. Not because they are cold, but because they see too much. Schopenhauer believed that the more you understand human nature, the more isolated you become, because you no longer fit the mold that society was built around. And so, for the thinker, awareness becomes a weight, not a burden to give up, but one that must be carried. History is full of people who saw too far, too soon, and paid the price for it. Socrates was executed for encouraging others to think critically. His questions were too disruptive for a society built on blind tradition. Galileo proved the earth moved around the sun and was silenced by religious authority because the truth threatened their control. Nietzsche was dismissed as unstable because his ideas about morality, power, and the self were too unsettling for his time. Tesla imagined free energy for the world and was crushed by those who profited from control. He died alone, while others used his ideas to build empires. Turing helped end a world war and built the foundation for modern computing, yet was punished for his personal life, driven to suicide by a system that couldn't accept him. And Hypatia, a philosopher and mathematician in ancient Rome, was murdered for teaching reason. In a world ruled by fear and superstition, each of these figures introduced something the world wasn't ready for, and in return, the world turned against them. Only later were they celebrated. When their ideas no longer threatened power, they were honored, statues built, books written, but during their lifetimes, they suffered, because intelligence, when it disrupts comfort, is often mistaken for danger. So, if the world resists intelligence, what can the thinker do? First, stop expecting everyone to understand. Not because others are stupid, but because not everyone is ready. You don't need millions to hear you. You need a few who are listening on the same frequency. Save your deepest thoughts for those who seek depth. Don't waste them on those who fear reflection. Embrace solitude, not as a punishment, but as a sanctuary. Use your alone time to build, to read, to understand. Seek out others who value truth. Even if they're rare, they exist in books, in conversations, in hidden corners of the world, and speak clearly. Not because people need to be dumbed down, but because clarity is kindness. Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Learn to carry your depth without overwhelming others. Not by hiding it, but by guiding others into it, step by step. The world may not be designed for deep thinkers, but that's never stopped them from shaping it. If you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, you're not broken. You're seeing clearly in a world that prefers shadows. Society doesn't fear intelligence. It fears what intelligence reveals. And that's why thinkers get rejected. Not because they are wrong, but because they are right too early. But don't retreat, and don't silence yourself. Find those who hear you. Use your mind as a light, not a weapon. And keep thinking deeply, even when the world looks away. Because it's deep thinkers, not popular voices, who move humanity forward.